You are listening to the Innovators Behind Disruption, a podcast series brought to you by Evolve ETFs. The world is evolving. Your investments should too.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next episode of the Innovators Behind Disruption. My name is Raj Lalla. I'm the CEO of Evolve ETFs, and I'm joined by a very special guest today named Shawn Kanungo. Shawn, thanks for being part of this.
Well, listen, I'm really excited to be part of this. I'm a big fan of the podcast, of the YouTube channel. And by the way, if you've gotten this far past the introduction, subscribe to this on YouTube or on iTunes. Follow it on Spotify. It would help. We need this podcast to go #1 in the business section. Raj, come on.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Shawn. We're on the same page. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I got 2 little kids. I spent my entire career in strategy innovation, spent 12 years at Deloitte, helping and leading a lot of their innovation initiatives across Western Canada and beyond. Left Deloitte about 3-4 years ago to start my own firm where we advise organizations on innovation, disruptive innovation, and also, dipping my toes in the arena and actually trying to grow some companies in the space as well. So, I'm on the ground floor on what's happening in the disruption space, which is interesting because you're actively looking at some of the companies that are the disruptors or the disruptive technologies and thinking about it from a thematic perspective, while I am trying to help organizations sort of avoid disruption or navigate disruption or embrace disruption. So, it's 2 sides of the coin.
So that dovetails into a good first section of discussion. When you are talking to organizations, are you finding that they are embracing disruptive tech or disruptive innovation, or are you finding that it's something that's a little bit scary for them and it requires a lot of coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we deal with the same challenges as you try to convince and persuade people about new ways of doing things. I mean, it's just part of our human nature, right? We don't like change. We don't like when new things come out and change how we work, how we operate. And so it's always a struggle. And I think as innovators, our job is not to really convince them that this is the path, but really persuade them, show them, not tell them, or help them experiment, help them dip their toes into certain types of technologies. It's always a fight because when it comes to disruptive technology and disruptive innovation, as you know, everything sounds like a joke. Everything is they dismiss everything. I like cloud computing. What are you talking about? Blockchain, Bitcoin, like space. I mean, it all sounds like a joke until really the joke is on us. And so that's what I believe in. But, I'm going to throw it back to you on this because, you're actively trying to get people to think about disruptive technology. Your themes are really around this. How do you do this as well?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it does require a change in overall behavior. But when you think about disruptive technologies or disruptive innovations, and I tend to use those terms interchangeably, but I'll try and stick with disruptive innovation. We've had so many different events in our lives that have taken place that at the beginning, the early adopters are the ones that are the winners. At the beginning, everyone criticizes or is a naysayer. I mean, you go back to thinking about like the horse and buggy in the early 1900s, and then Ford comes out with the first vehicle, and people say nobody's ever going to use a car. Why wouldn't you want to stick to your horse and buggy? And 15 years later, there were no cars, there were no horse and buggies on the road. You think about the internet, and how many people thought the internet's never going to catch on. You think about the iPhone, and people like Steve Ballmer saying nobody's going to ever buy the iPhone. Why would you want a device like that? So you think about all of those innovations in our world, in history, and most people have been naysayers, and it's very difficult to convince individuals. And then you forget about how these technologies have ultimately ended up getting integrated into your life. Like I often say to people, thank God we're going through this pandemic today instead of 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, and you mentioned it, 10 years ago, we didn't have cloud computing functioning the way we do today. So we wouldn't have been able to do this. We wouldn't have been able to use proper video conferencing tools. We wouldn't have been able to stream our movies effectively. We wouldn't have been able to stream our games. We wouldn't have been able to all work from home and download software and so on. This is all cloud-based technology. So without it, we would have been going through this pandemic in a much more isolated environment. So I think people are starting to embrace it a little bit more. I can tell you, in my world, talking to investment advisors, this year alone, I've had more conversations about the integration of disruptive investing into their portfolios than the previous 4 years combined. So we are seeing definitely further embrace. We are seeing people starting to get away from the thought of, robotics is so far-fetched, it's never going to catch on, to seeing them in the hospital now and realizing that they're going to get integrated into our daily lives. So I like to see that. I love to talk about it. Like you, it's such a fascinating topic.
Well, you know what? I have to applaud you, because I think what you guys have done with your themes, I would actually broadly term it, describe it as a lot of your products actually are electricity. So to me, like, cybersecurity is electricity. Cloud is electricity. Ethereum, Ether, blockchain is electricity, meaning this is the backbone of how organizations will operate in the future. It's like you can't bet against electricity. It is unstoppable. And so I think, there are some stuff that are on the entertainment or media side, whether it's esports and whatnot, but really you're actually investing these products around, like, the backbone, the foundation of a new generation of organizations. So that's why I think it's brilliant.
So talk to me about when you're going out there and talk, because you do something, even though we're on the same page as it relates to disruptive innovation, your process is very different than my process. My process is about bringing product to marketplace. Your process is about educating people and embracing people, having them embrace disruptive innovation within their respective businesses. So walk me through your process as it relates to that.
Yeah, I think it is very different, because I think you have to be sort of on the pulse of, like, what are those disruptive companies that are out there. And most people, 99% of incumbents, like, they don't care about the new companies, autonomous electric shed. Like, they see it as a theme, but they at the end of the day, they're like trying to install Zoom, right? They're trying to they're trying to figure that out. To me, it comes back to the idea of problems. What problems do you want to solve within your organization? How do we reframe some of those problems? How do we reinvent what we're doing just by asking different questions? And then ultimately, how do we go through a process of experimentation? How do we start with very small problems, with very small teams, with very small sprints, and see how we can move the needle ultimately to create small innovations that ultimately sort of disrupt us? I think that's the process of ultimately trying to navigate disruption, or trying to disrupt yourself, is through this process of experimentation. I believe that there is actually no playbook anymore when it comes to innovation or disruption. And this sounds crazy, because I spent my entire career at an amazing global consulting firm, thinking that there was a playbook of how to do strategy and innovation, and it doesn't exist. Like, the world is full of abundance, algorithms, and anomalies, and if you're looking for a playbook, it doesn't exist. The only thing that you can do is be nimble and flexible and experimental. And I don't see myself as a futurist. I can't predict what the future is going to be, because it's impossible. The world is moving so quickly. But if you're just nimble and flexible, experimental, that is the DNA that you need to navigate in this entire space. And that's what we try to help organizations with.
Yeah, it must be quite the endeavor to do that. It's not easy. And I think that there is still a big fear factor as it relates to automation, as it relates to embracing robotics, as it relates to embracing artificial intelligence, for example. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about where you see the growth of those areas as it relates to a lot of the companies that you're consulting for.
Well, listen, I mean, going back to the comment about electricity, I think data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, I mean, this is going to be electricity for people. It's an unstoppable trend. It is, It's you know, of course, a lot of people are afraid of it, but it's going to just evolve everyone's jobs, right? Yes, it's going to replace. Yes, it's going to make some jobs obsolete, but ultimately, it's going to evolve. Listen, we don't think twice about the people that were like switchboard operators or like the elevator doormen. Like, we don't think about them because they went on and did something else, right?
Yeah.
So I think in this age, it's how can we reskill, retrain people. I think that's going to become a lot more important. But I think in this age of automation, I think as human beings, like, we should be doubling down on becoming better problem solvers and being better creatives and being more imaginative and more innovative, working with diverse teams. Like, I think that's going to become like the superhero skill set as we move into this age of automation. Yeah, some jobs will be eliminated, and actually, it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. If you're in a job that should be eliminated, then that's great. You shouldn't be doing that. There's some things that humans shouldn't be doing, and we should be doing more creative, you know, type work. I do want to say though, I do want to say this. I know this is going to sound blasphemous, but I believe that we have totally oversold the artificial intelligence conversation today. Like, it's we think that we're going to turn on the like a knob and like we're going to sprinkle some AI on something and magically things will appear. Like, we're not even close to, you know, being there yet. We can't even like properly like get on a, you know, like on a Zoom meeting, let alone like sprinkle AI onto something. I just think that the story has been oversold and we're just not there yet. Obviously, there's been some amazing innovations. I mean, look at the efficiency the of things like TikTok and their algorithm and how beautiful it's been. And I know you have a Tesla, and you know how amazing that's been. But can you just agree with me for a second that potentially the artificial intelligence story has been oversold? And I know this is sort of against a little bit of your portfolio, but listen, it's been oversold.
Yeah, I actually do agree with you. And you know, it's interesting because we get asked the question quite often about why haven't we created an artificial intelligence ETF? And I say, well, it's because, first of all of the big firms out there are integrating artificial intelligence into their businesses. For example, I would argue Google has the most advanced artificial intelligence within any. It's funny, I said Google, and of course my phone turned on. It has the most advanced artificial intelligence elements within their business. So many companies are embracing it. I agree that it's a little overhyped. I do think eventually it's going to become very important. Look, I mean, we have an automotive innovation ETF. Artificial intelligence is going to be critical for us to eventually have self-driving cars. We need the ability for a self-driving car to be able to tell the difference between a bag flying across the front windshield versus a baby carriage, right? That's going to require deep learning. That's going to require artificial intelligence as well. But I'm with you. I'm on the same page. It is overhyped. And quite honestly, the other reason why we haven't launched one is there's not a big enough public domain of companies that are publicly listed that purely involved in artificial intelligence. I mean, you and I have spoken about this a couple of times in the past. One of the things that we are very focused on in the products that we bring to market are being pure play access to that theme, right? So yeah, Google owns Stadia, which is their e-gaming division. Apple owns Arcade, which is their e-gaming division. The big tech complexes, Amazon owns Twitch, all involved in e-gaming. But they don't make it into our e-gaming ETF because those business lines are so small on a relative scale of the overall business. We want investors to get access to the pure play companies in those specific themes.
Yeah, well, you know, you do actually have a product around artificial intelligence, and it's in your entire disruptive technology. Like every company, like you have a product around Fang. They're all AI companies, right? All the esports gaming players, they're all embedding it in anyways. Like it's you already have it, right? But to that point, you know, I know it's funny because when we chatted on the phone, this was before this. I think that was right before you'd launched the your Ether you know, product, which is really exciting, and obviously you know, just being, you know, the first. And I'm, you know, at the time that we chatted, like there was like this crazy bubble around Bitcoin and NFTs and you know, I we all knew that we were in a bubble. Like we all knew that there was a lot of hype. I feel like we're entering into the winter, which is great, and I think it's going to be a really positive thing. And I listened to your interview with Tyler Winklevoss, which was awesome. And if you're this far, I encourage you to go back and listen to that. But like, where do you think we're at in terms of a blockchain hype cycle? Like, do you think we're in the winter now?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we've been debating this internally. You never really know it's a winter until you pass through it, right? Unfortunately, like you talk about crypto winter from a couple of years ago, nobody was talking about it while they were going through it. They were talking about it in retrospect, right? It's always 2020 in hindsight, but crypto has definitely had a challenging few months. I think that there needs to be some decoupling that takes place within the entire crypto universe. I think, for example,
Yeah.
So I think Ether, for example, is very different than Bitcoin. And I think, but you take a look at the price performance of both of them, and they're moving in tandem pretty much every day lately, like in the last couple of months. I think blockchain has so many other applicable uses beyond cryptocurrencies. And we've seen it, right? You've seen companies like Walmart utilizing blockchain for inventory control and inventory management, being able to detect, find that bad mango in their produce aisle and isolate the farm that it grew on, and then just take away those mangoes instead of taking away all of the other ones. Like there's so many other uses for different technologies. Bitcoin is the gold standard. Bitcoin is digital gold, but Bitcoin doesn't have the use case that something like Ether has. So I think that you're going to see, right now they're all moving in tandem. I think we're going to get to a point where they start to diverge from each other or decouple, as I said, where they start to perform differently. And that is when, we're going to be at a more mature stage of crypto adoption.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think I'm excited. Like I don't want to give the bull case for Ethereum, but the reality is that you're having so many developers around the world build on top of it. And I look at it as like mobile. When mobile sort of really kicked off, I would say after the iPhone, it was just like the only apps that they had were like the weather and maps and like really rudimentary apps. And then you had an entire ecosystem building on top of it. And I feel the same thing is happening for Ethereum. And right now the app, like what are the apps for blockchain right now? Like crypto, DeFi, NFTs, social tokens. Like the game has just started. Like I think in 10 years we're gonna be laughing those things right now are the maps and the weather. Like we can't even think about the new innovations that are gonna be built on top of it. I'm just so bullish about it because I think finally, and we can talk about the creator economy. I just think that what Ethereum is going to be able to do is going to be, it's going to allow people to finally monetize their craft, no middlemen involved. It's such an exciting time, and I'm thrilled that it's in the winter. I'm thrilled that the hype is, I term it as like it was like a club like a couple months ago, and everyone was having a good time. There was like bottles over here, and there was like people dancing over here, and like everyone is having a great time. Everyone was like losing their shirts and like losing money. And now the winter has sort of come, but everyone's going to remember the technology, and you're also going to have all these developers build on top of it. So that's what I'm really excited about.
I totally agree with you. So I know we talked about the electricity side of disruptive innovation like cyber and cloud computing, and I would say 5G fits into that category for sure as well. What are some of the other areas of disruptive innovation that you find really fascinating? And what do you, and actually, and the second part is, what do you see to be, a couple of the biggest disruptive forces that are not necessarily well recognized today, but you feel like over the next 5 or 10 years are going to be so important to us?
It's interesting. In the year 2000, we were appalled that there were companies making billions of dollars exploiting cheap labor overseas. Then in the 2010s, we were appalled that there were companies making billions of dollars, making money like with very few employees. I think we're entering into an era where you're going to have individuals that are making billions of dollars,
Yeah.
with very few employees. Like the means of production have been reduced to almost zero. There is you don't need as much infrastructure. Media is abundant. I think the thing that I'm actually excited about when it comes to disruptive innovation is the cultural aspect, the ability for you to gain an audience, for the ability for you to build a community. I feel the next wave of disruptors will be those cultural disruptors, those that can actually build a community around them and build products and services on top of what they're doing. I think crypto and NFTs are going to be part of it, but that is actually going to be really exciting. And as we enter into this new world of media and the metaverse, like the space is just starting, and that is actually what I'm excited about when it comes to disruptive innovation that most people don't think about, because when people think about disruption, they always think about technology, but we're entering into this era where like the individual can be the disruptor themselves and become a billionaire, like a one person, $1 billion business. It sounds ridiculous, but that's what we're going into.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting. I mean, from my perspective, I think that something that's already caught on, obviously, is the entire innovation being driven, no pun intended, being driven by the automobile. It's a game changer. I mean, I think that the car is going through its biggest transformation of forget about our lifetime, but again, I mentioned at the beginning, it's the biggest transformation since the horse and buggy. Between the electrification and the technology that's going into cars today, I think the next 10 years in that industry alone are going to be incredibly fascinating. I did make a prediction when we launched our cars ETF back in 2017, and my daughters would have been 9 at the time. And I said, I don't think my daughters are ever going to need to drive a car because by the time they get to 16, 17, we will have fully autonomous cars on the road. I'm going to have to take that back because I don't think we're going to be there now. Now they're 13, and I don't think we're going to be there by the time they're 17. But it's coming, and that technology is going to be so relevant for us. I mean, it's going to make our lives so much easier and safer. From that, for the other technology, I don't know if you want to call it. It's not technology, but it is technology driven to a degree. Is I think people are not paying enough attention to biotech and genomics, for example.
Yeah.
Right now, like genomics is going to be a game changer for our healthcare system. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I mean, I always say on my webinars, you don't have to look further than the COVID vaccine, right? I mean, genomics was front and center in the development, and was one of the major reasons why we got a vaccine developed in 9 months instead of 12 years, which is what it typically takes. But now I think we're going to see genomics start to take on a bigger and bigger role with diabetes, heart disease, and cancer as well.
And artificial intelligence is going to play a big part in that, and also in the autonomous electric shared connected vehicle. The only thing is that we need the infrastructure around it, right? You need like you need the charging stations, you need other cars connected, you need there's so many pieces that need to come into play in order for that to happen. What I'm actually most excited about is the unknown, is the fact that you talked about this being the biggest sort of moment for vehicles. I agree, like since horse and buggy, like this is the next moment. But when the vehicle was introduced, it created new industries. Like it literally created the accommodation hoteling industry. The fact that now people can move and get go around their country. Well, you need places where people can stay. You need restaurants where people can eat. I think it helped expand different industries. And what I'm excited about when it comes to the autonomous electric shared connected revolution is that there are industries that we have not thought about before that are going to be created, similar to like what I said about blockchain. Like that's what I'm like thinking about. Like, what is the autonomous car going to have industries within it, like gaming and meditation, and like I'm just like, that's why it's so exciting to be in this space, because the future is uncertain and it's unpredictable and it's infinite.
What advice would you give kids today? that are, let's say, my kids' age, 13, that in 10 years from now, I hope in 10 years, maybe sooner, that they enter the real world, the real work world. What advice would you give them today? Because it's going to be a different world in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And the important skill sets that kids need 10 years from now are going to be very different than the skill sets that I needed when I entered the workforce, unfortunately, many years ago.
You know what? I mean, this is a question that I grapple with all the time because my kids are a little bit younger than yours. My kids are 4 and 2. And this is what my wife and I are thinking about all the time. Like, what's going to be relevant? What jobs will be relevant for them in the future? I think ultimately you can't predict what jobs will be relevant in the future. You can't predict which industries will be relevant in the future. I just talked about like the things that you're investing in or your products are around electricity. Like, do you need to be an electrician? Nah. Do you need to be an artificial intelligence data scientist? Well, maybe the code will sort of code itself. So I think ultimately the skill set for the future has to be around creativity, imagination, empathy, emotional intelligence, like being able to communicate with somebody, being able to go at a dinner and hold a conversation for 2 hours. I think these are skills that are the most important in the future as we move into the electrification, and I'm saying cyber and AI and all blockchain. Like, we don't have to think about that stuff. That stuff will be on. Yes, there'll be people that will make really great money being cyber professionals, and yes, there's a big gap there, and there's a big gap when it comes to AI. But that's what I think. That's what I want my kids to do, is like try a whole bunch of different things, and I'm sure the same thing with with your children as well.
Yeah, I think you completely nailed it. I'm on the exact same page as you. I teach our kids that your interpersonal skills are going to be a very rare skill set 10, 15 years from now. I would argue that they already are, and probably have become worse during the pandemic. We just hired a summer intern who's my next door neighbor at the cottage.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I love this kid. And I love this kid because when we used to invite his family over all the time for like dinner and drinks outside and things like that, this kid would have been like, I've known him now for, I don't know, 6 years. So he's now 17. So I've known him since he was 12. And every time that they would come, he would sit at the table outside with us, not on his phone, just listening to the conversation, like the way I grew up, listening to my parents talking with uncles and aunts and friends and stuff like that. And it sounds like such a simple thing to listen and contribute as much as you can into a conversation. But most kids that you see today, what do? They come over to people's house. That's what they do,
exactly.
Right? Or their iPad the entire time. I remember early days, like 5, 6 years ago, we went to birthday parties with the kids, and these kids would all be pulling out their iPads, and they're all sitting on the couch together, and they're all on their iPads separately. And I thought, wow, there's a real problem here from a socialization perspective. So I totally agree with
I want to ask you this.
Sure.
Is this a huge paradox then? We're both talking about disruption. We're talking about disruptive technologies. Literally, you have products with Facebook and Netflix and Google and all these things on it. And here we're trying to tell our kids, do not get obsessed with this stuff. Yet we know that, like, are we evil in this sense? Like, I don't know what it's like. It's like the engineers at Apple that said they would never get their kids an iPad, or the people at Facebook say don't share anything that you have on Facebook.
Steve Jobs never let his kids plug in. I don't believe Bill Gates did either. I mean, 2 of the biggest technology icons in history didn't put it in front of their kids. But look, I'll say, even just with technology, doesn't mean that you can create without technology. Doesn't mean that you're creating good interpersonal kids, because there's a lot of people my age and your age who didn't grow up with iPads and iPhones and a ton of technology, and they still have terrible social skills as well, right? I mean, sometimes part of the reason is that they buried their head in a textbook or textbooks their entire life. I apologize in advance to all of my doctor friends, but most doctors don't have the best interpersonal skills, right? I would say 90% of them, because they're so buried in textbooks their entire life that they never really learned how to develop a personality where they can interact with people in a non-clinical way.
Yeah, we're going to clip this and just send it to all the doctors, by the way.
I hope none of my neighbors see this. And so to me, I think it's not just technology that's created, but I do think technology has definitely furthered that isolation or that challenge. But I do think that 10, 15 years from now, those interpersonal skills, that emotional intelligence, the entire EQ is going to be more important, because a lot of the technical work will be done for us by artificial intelligence, computers, things like that. And so what it's going to require is the ability to have those conversations at the dinner table that are interactive and interesting.
So let me ask you this. Will you have a Metaverse ETF? And you're kind of already in the Metaverse ETF with your esports and sort of gaming product. But, if I look at the kids today, they're obsessed with Roblox and Fortnite, and they literally value digital goods over, tangible goods. My niece, for example, I say, what do you, here's your birthday money. What do you want to spend your money on? She's like, I want to spend it on a Fortnite skin.
Skin. Yeah.
I actually think that it's not crazy to think that people value digital things more than sort of real life things. And that's why we love, if we got a Instagram blue check mark, or, those things sort of matter to us. And I feel more and more as we live through our phones, this is the gateway drug into the metaverse. And I think, like the Fortnites and the Roblox, obviously, you're bullish on those things too. But, will you have a Metaverse ETF?
It's possible. It's not something that's on my radar right now. And for the listeners that are not fully aware of what metaverse means, as it relates to e-gaming, metaverse is effectively the marriage between e-gaming and social media. So it provides these new worlds or these new platforms. And Shawn mentioned, you've got Roblox, you've got Minecraft, you've got Fortnite, where you're in a world and you're with people and you develop friendships, and many of those friendships become long lasting. And that's like a great example of the crossing over of two major industries between e-gaming and social media. And you're seeing that more and more. And I got to be honest with you, Shawn, I don't know if it's a good thing or not yet, because I've heard both sides of that argument, right? I mean, on the positive side, I've seen through this pandemic, a lot of people actually make new, real friends, locally and internationally, that they feel are going to be long-lasting relationships. It also limited the amount of isolation that a lot of people had during the pandemic. So I think it's very good. The flip side of it is, as somebody that, before COVID wasn't spending much time in front of his screen, was spending more time at tables, having lunches and dinners and drinks with clients and other people, I really, really miss it. And those kids don't. I'll tell you a really quick story. A few friends came over for the first time a couple of weeks ago. They brought their kids, very similar age to mine, and the kids came in and they were all on their phones. And we live near a big park in Toronto, and they were all on their phones. And my kids were trying to get them to, put the phones down and have some fun. We live at Hyde Park. They went to Hyde Park. They went for a long walk. They went to the zoo. There's a zoo in the park and everything else. They came back. Parents all sent me messages afterwards saying our kids had the best time that they've had in over a year, but because it forced them to get out of that old habit of social media and their gaming on their phone. So I don't know if it's a good thing. My daughters don't game. And it's not because we've told them they're not allowed to. It's just that it never really resonated with them. And I think that that's great, because I think it's been great for their overall personality development as well. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but at the end of the day,
No,
I think
listen, I
and
think
then you've got the whole predator issue, right? Which is another whole issue as it relates to the metaverse, and I know many people have had to deal with issues around that too. So I don't know if it's a good thing or not. For me, no, but I can see why other people it's been very helpful for through this pandemic.
Yeah, I think there's going to be new industries created in the metaverse. Like you're already seeing companies, sort of like the Gucci's, build partnerships with Roblox and being able to sell like more expensive sort of Gucci bags on Roblox than they do it sort of in person. So there's going to be in different sort of industries, companies that take advantage of this space. But I agree with you fundamentally, as it relates to human beings, like we're designed, unless the internet is rewiring our brains, we're designed to be, intimate, share a meal, share some bread. That's what humans are all about.
So listen, Shawn, we ran a lot longer than we were supposed to, but that's okay. It was a very interesting conversation. How do people find out more about you, the talks that I know you've got a big presence online, and I know that I think I was reading an article that Forbes named you the greatest. Was it the greatest?
No. It was one guy says best virtual keynote speaker. Anyways, I think you can find me anywhere at Shawn Kanungo. I'm pretty open to you don't have to follow. You can send me a note. You can follow me on LinkedIn and YouTube and wherever else. But no, I just want to thank you so much for this time. This was a lot of fun. I love what you're doing. Like I said, I think the themes that you've picked are like you've basically bet on electricity, which is unstoppable. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I enjoy the podcast. So yeah, it was a pleasure being on.
Likewise, Shawn, you're doing a great job. And you know what? You're an example of somebody that I have befriended through this pandemic, never met face to face, and I feel like we know each other really well. So that's something positive, and someday soon, I'm sure we'll get to grab a coffee or have a beer together. Look forward to it.
Can't wait.
Thanks.
See you later.
You have been listening to the Innovators Behind Disruption, a podcast series brought to you by Evolve ETFs. Remain educated, be informed. Sign up for our newsletter and learn more at evolveetfs.com.